today y'all are taking notes on interval notation. You know a little bit about interval notation already. I'm just going to remind you and maybe add a little bit to it. All right. So when you're graphing on a number line or you're solving an inequality, the inequality can be written in set notation, which is what this one is. This is set notation. When it looks like this, we're going to talk about interval notation, though. On interval notation, when you have a greater than or less than with no equal sign underneath, you're going to use a parentheses. If you have an equal sign underneath, you're going to use a bracket. All right, so if we're going to put this example 1 in interval notation, then there is no parentheses, or there is no equal sign here. So if we're going to rewrite this, we would have a parentheses. Now, as we go to graph it on the number line, y'all would usually say, okay, I'm going to put an open dot at 2 and then shade. But now, instead of an open dot, we could use a parentheses and open it in the direction of your shade. So if you remember from middle school, your shading is going to follow the direction of the point of your inequality symbol. As long as your X is the first thing you see, you go in the direction of the point. So if I was shading here, I'd be shading to the right of 2, started at 2 and to the right. So my parentheses is going to open in that direction. That's a parentheses, and I'm shading forever that way. All right. If I put that answer in interval notation instead of leaving it in set notation, which they usually want you to do, I would write it as parentheses 2, comma, infinity. It starts here and goes forever. Anytime you have an infinity, remember, you put a parentheses as well. So that would be interval notation. Just another way to show it. All right. Now, sometimes they'll talk about bounded and unbounded. When you're bounded, you actually stop at a point. So for instance, you might have -1 here, and you might have 3 here. If I'm stopping at those points, I'm bounded. It won't go any further. It's shaded in between. Unbounded, one of the sides may go to infinity or negative infinity, or both of them. So it may be something like so this will be going towards infinity, so this one would not be bounded. So usually they'll just say which one is it, bounded or unbounded. So it's either closed or it's continues on. All right, this is a compound inequality, and we're going to graph this and we're going to rewrite it in interval notation. This compound inequality, it's like they've taken 2 statements and put them together as one, so you got 3 parts to it. So I'm going to graph it just like it looks. I'm going to have -2, and I'm going to have 0, and I've got an equal sign here, so that means I've got a bracket, and an equal sign here, so a bracket, and I'm shading X. You're always shading X, so I'll shade in between. So it would be a bracket, and shade in between. And notice the brackets are always open towards the shade, just like the parentheses are open towards the shade. So that would be the correct graph for that. Now, interval notation is easy once you got the graph, so you just kind of rewrite it. So I'm starting at -2, and I've got a bracket on it, and I'm going to 0, which also has a bracket. So that would be the graph and the answer done. All right. So now we'll look at when you have a or in between your 2 statements, you're going to actually have 2 things to graph, 2 pieces. So you'll just do each one. So I'll start with this one, 3. So I'll put 3 on here, and I have a equal sign, so that means I'll have a bracket, and I'm shading towards the right because that's the direction this is pointing. So I've got a bracket at 3, open towards the shade. which goes that way. All right, now we'll do this one. I got 0 with an equal sign, so 0 is going to have a bracket, and I'm shading to the left, so my bracket is open to the left. So that would be that picture. Now, I need to put it in interval notation. Looking at the picture, I start over here, I'm going forever this way, so I'm going towards negative infinity. I'm stopping at 0. Infinity always has parentheses, 0 has a bracket. So I'm going to say, there's 1/2 of my answer. Here I've got starting at 3 with a bracket, going forever towards infinity, parentheses. And a lot of times they'll put a U in between, which represents that word or they gave you there. So that's just like this or this. So that would be done. All right, on the next one, we're going to have to solve a little before we graph. So do your normal equation rules apply to inequalities. So to get x by itself, move the 1. So I'm going to do opposite, -1. So I've got 2x less than or equal to 4. Divide by 2. Now, if this number you're dividing by is a negative, if you multiply or divide by a negative, you would flip this symbol here. That's something from the past that you've learned. I'm okay here because it's a positive. So this is x less than or equal to 2. Now this is in set notation, so we're going to graph it and then look at it and put it in interval notation to be done. All right, so we got 2 has an equal sign, so it'll be a bracket, and our shading is going left. So bracket on 2, open bracket shading towards the left and open towards the left. So that would be the picture. And then in interval notation, I'm going towards negative infinity. I'm stopping at 2, always parentheses on infinity, and 2 has the bracket. So that would be done. Now, I'm going to go ahead and write down what I said about the division rule, or multiply. So note to self, if you multiply or divide by a negative, reverse the symbol. So for instance, -3x greater than 9. I would divide by -3. X, reverse the symbol because we divide by negative, and this will be -3. It doesn't matter that your answer is negative. It only matters that you're multiplying or dividing by a negative to do that. So watch for that. All right, last one. All right, here we got a compound inequality, and we're solving the compound inequality. So when you look in the middle, you notice we got this +3. We want x by itself. So I want rid of the +3. So I'm going to subtract 3. But I need to do it all 3 places on this compound statement. So if I do it here, I need to do it here and here. -2 and -3 becomes -5. X is by itself now. And then here I've got 6 minus 3 is 3. So here's my set notation answer. So I'm going to graph. So I've got a -5 and a 3. Not both of which, excuse me. This one doesn't have an equals, this one does. So that means I have a parentheses on the -5, a bracket on the 3, and remember the shade is always, you're always shading the X in all of these. So X is in between them, so I'm shading in between. Again, the brackets and the parentheses follow the direction of the shade. So there's your picture. Now in interval notation, I would be -5 to 3, parentheses on the -5, bracket on the 3. Again, it's easier to graph than rewrite it.